am Amelia Earhart. Greetings. Please follow the second part of my story. Thank you.
In the early 1920s, Earhart and a young friend visited an air show held alongside the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto. She recalled, "The interest sparked in Toronto led me to attend all the local flying exhibitions I could. A highlight of that day was a flying demonstration by a World War I ace. Seeing Earhart and her friends standing apart, the pilot dove toward them. I'm sure he said to himself, 'Watch me make them scamper.'" Amelia stood her ground. "I did not understand it at the time, but I believe that little red airplane said something to me as it swished by." On December 28, 1920, Earhart and her father attended an air meet at Doherty Field in Long Beach, California. She asked her father to inquire about passenger flights and lessons. The next day, she booked a 10-minute passenger flight at Emery Rogers Field with pilot Frank Hawks, who later became a famous air racer. The flight cost $10, about $160 in 2024. That flight changed her life. "By the time I had got 200 or 300 feet off the ground, I knew I had to fly." The following month, Earhart contracted Nita Snuck as her flight instructor for an initial 12-hour course costing $500, about $9,000 in 2024. To pay for lessons, she worked in various jobs, including photographer, truck driver, and stenographer at the local telephone company, saving $1,000, about $18,000 in 2024. Her first lesson was on January 3, 1921 at Kinner Field. Snuck trained her on a refurbished Curtiss JN-4 Canuck. To get to the field, Earhart took a bus and then walked 4 miles. Her mother contributed part of the $1,000 stake against her better judgment. Earhart cut her hair short to look like other women aviators. After 6 months, against Snuck's advice, she bought her own plane, a bright yellow Kinner Airster biplane she nicknamed the Canary. After her first successful solo flight, she bought a new leather flying coat. Because it looked too new, she wore it to bed and stained it with aircraft oil to give it a worn look. On October 22, 1922, she flew the Canary to 14,000 feet, setting a world altitude record for female pilots. On May 16, 1923, she became the 16th woman in the United States to receive a pilot's license from the Federation Aeronautique International. In the early 1920s, after a failed investment in a gypsum mine, the inheritance Amelia's mother had been managing dwindled. With no resources to continue flying, Earhart sold the Canary and another Kinner, buying instead a yellow Kissel Goldbug Roadster she nicknamed the Yellow Peril. Her sinus condition worsened, and in 1924, she underwent another unsuccessful surgery. She tried various ventures, including starting a photography company. After her parents' divorce in 1924, Earhart drove her mother across the continent in the Yellow Peril, traveling through the western U.S. and north into Banff, Alberta, Canada, before ending in Boston, Massachusetts. There, she underwent another, more successful sinus operation. After recovery, she returned to Columbia University briefly, but had to quit as her mother could no longer afford tuition. In 1925, Earhart found work first as a teacher and then as a social worker at Denison House, a settlement house in Boston. At the time, she lived in Medford, Massachusetts. While in Medford, she maintained her interest in flying, joining the Boston chapter of the American Aeronautical Society, eventually becoming vice president. She flew out of Denison Airport in Quincy, helped fund its operations with a small investment, and in 1927 made the first official flight from the field. She also worked as a sales representative for Kinner Aircraft and wrote newspaper columns promoting aviation. As her local fame grew, she began planning an organization for female aviators. In early 1928, inspired by Charles Lindbergh's successful 1927 solo Atlantic crossing. American heiress Amy Phipps Guest announced her intention to become the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. Living in London with her husband, former British Air Minister Frederick Guest, she used her wealth and social connections to assemble a team. She hired pilot Wilmer Stoltz of Williamsburg, Pennsylvania, who had recently completed the first non-stop flight from New York to Havana. Guest also recruited mechanic and co-pilot Lewis Gordon of Texas. For the plane, she secured a Fokker F-7B trimotor from explorer Richard E. Byrd, who had planned to use it for an Antarctic expedition. Guest named the plane Friendship in honor of U.S.-UK relations. But her family opposed her flying. Pressured, Guest reluctantly gave up her dream, but decided to sponsor another woman instead. She sought the right girl, a qualified, educated, attractive American woman aviator. In April 1928, George Palmer Putnam, the publisher and promoter of Charles Lindbergh's best-selling autobiography, We, learned of the planned transatlantic attempt. Curious, he met with his friend, Captain Hilton H. Raleigh, and told him he had heard that Richard Byrd had sold his plane to a mysterious buyer, and that floats were being attached to a Fokker aircraft at East Boston Airport. Determined to get involved, Putnam encouraged Raleigh to crash the gate and investigate. Raleigh found Wilmer Stoltz in a bar and, catching him in a talkative mood, learned about Amy Guest and the true purpose of the newly outfitted Fokker seaplane Friendship. Putnam and Raleigh decided to take on the task of finding the right sort of girl on Guest's behalf. Raleigh contacted his friend, Admiral Reginald R. Belknap, in Boston. After hearing Guest's criteria, Belknap immediately replied, "Call Denison House and ask for Amelia Earhart." When she received Raleigh's call, Earhart was initially skeptical but agreed to meet him at his office. Upon her arrival, Raleigh was convinced he had found the right woman. Almost immediately, he asked her, "Would you like to be the first woman to cross the Atlantic?" Earhart later wrote, "Under such circumstances, I could hardly refuse." Still, Earhart set conditions before accepting. She made it clear that the role of passenger alone held no appeal. She wanted the chance to take the controls. Although she lacked experience with multi-engine aircraft and blind instrument flying, it was agreed that, weather permitting, she would be allowed to fly the plane for part of the journey. Her flight contract stipulated that she would hold the title of commander aboard Friendship, with final authority over policy, procedures, personnel matters, and any issues arising during the mission, at least until they reached London. Both Wilmer Stoltz and Lewis Gordon would serve as her subordinates for the flight.